Okay. Welcome, everybody. I have a super special guest for our patient empowerment interview this month. This guy's one of the very, very interesting people in the little pueblo where I live. If you've seen the other interviews, you know there's some other interesting folks here, but I think this one really takes the prize. I'm here with Keith, the Chocolate Shaman, right, affectionately dubbed, and it's appropriate to say that he didn't call himself this. He was actually named this by people in the town. I'm going to let him share with you what he does, but essentially this month we're focused on, and I'm talking about something that I did write about in the Patient Empowerment Manifesto, on cacao. So-called food of the gods here in the Maya kingdom in Guatemala, where I am and where I live part of the year, and where I've put a lot of this material together. This is a very, very special kind of plant teacher. Okay, this is not as far out as most people make it. There's actually something very mainstream about this. And if you think even through the history of Europe and the spice trade and why European countries wanted to colonize parts of the world, they were looking for interesting things and foods and things like this that came from different parts of the world. If you've ever had food in England, you know what I'm talking about. No offense to my English friend, my British friends. But in any case, right, here's one of the very special things that came out of the Americas and has a long, long history, but also a very modern application and a very interesting thing for you to know about. So we're here with Dr. Keith, I might add, and I'll let him tell you about what he does and the very, very special thing that he has created here in the town and that so many people are so very, very appreciative of. You get a chance to hear from one of the really top experts, I think, on this topic. Excellent. Well, welcome, Keith, to the Patient Empowerment expert interview here. And I know you have a very, very special thing that you've created here. I'm super happy to have you. So thanks again for joining us. And why don't you tell folks just a little bit about your story and the kind of unique thing that you've created here, because it is a very, very special thing, even in a town where there's a lot of special things going on. I think this is one of the real draws that people are so interested to come here and experience. So please, yeah, how did you get into this, and what's this all about for folks?
All right. Thank you, Christian. I went through a training process in the late 80s and early 90s that was basically, how do you get out of your own way? How do you make room inside for who you really are? How do you let go of all of the belief systems and the childhood conditioning that end up eventually as dramas in your life? Trauma, drama, pain, struggle, suffering that manifests symbolically as diseases and all these kinds of things, trying to direct you into something or move energies in one way. So I came to San Marcos here in Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, realized it was the place that I'd been prepared to teach, and I set up a practice and began seeing clients and doing what any therapist here would do. At a certain point, I had a visit from the cacao spirit, and I used to be an herbalist. I work with plant spirit medicine. I have worked with the energetic essence or the plant spirit behind the form called the plant. In other words, the consciousness behind the form. And this form, energy, great big being, came to visit and basically suggested that, why don't you go find out why chocolate was so important, was a deity to the ancients in this part of the world, the Aztecs, Toltecs, Olmecs, the Mayans. So I started with the local shamans, and they told me they used alcohol to induce altered states for student training and to do shamanic journeys. The anthropologist living across the lake for 50 years didn't know of any indigenous peoples in Central America. I looked in anthropological databases. I emailed people apprenticing with the first Mayan shamans to take Western students in the Mexican Yucatan. I Googled for everything I could think of about spiritual, ritual, ceremonial, shamanic, chocolate, or cacao. And nobody knew anything. There was nothing out there that I could find on the spiritual use. So anyway, by that time I went back and rang up the cacao spirit on the cosmic telephone and basically said, okay, I see why you're here. Something that was this important to the ancients in this part of the world. And no one seems to know anything about it now. I'm in. I smell adventure. Where are we going? So within a few weeks, she had taken me to a place on the other side of the mountains, down lower in the coastal rainforest. We're too high here for the cacao plant that grows the beans that make chocolate to grow. So I found my first chocolate and brought it back here and brewed up a cup. And after about 45 minutes, I went, this stuff is different. This is different than any other plant medicine I've ever used. It's not a psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take you on a trip. In fact, it doesn't do anything. But I could feel how important and profound and powerful it was. So I started drinking it most every day, doing the meditations, the inner work that I was doing at the time. That led to 3 years of traveling from Mexico to Panama, visiting growers, visiting indigenous people, visiting backyard chocolate making places, a few larger factories, buying it in markets, buying it all over, and finding that there was a huge range in potency. And today I can go into a market, buy delicious beans that chocolate's made from, and they have 25% of the strength.
Yeah.
I learned that Hershey's or Cadbury's is missing a little bit more than 99% of the active ingredients. Lindt or Green and Black's is missing about 80%. The organic bars on the market are widely available, from being like Lindt, Green and Black's, missing 75-80%, to being say down 10 or 15% if it's good indigenous South American chocolate. I learned that South American varieties, even when they're hybridized and mixed with Central American varieties, often have a great deal of caffeine. I'm not a caffeine user, and I found it to be too buzzy, no focus.
That's the one key difference. I know you talk about in your program that you do with people here. Hey, here's the similarities between cacao and regular coffee, caffeine, right? The chemical makeup and all the rest. But it is an enormous difference in experience, isn't it? Because you don't feel the edge that caffeine and coffee gives you. You feel this hyper clarity.
Yes.
I don't want to jump ahead here, but I mean the experience of the cacao experience and actually imbibing cacao, especially in a ceremonial kind of setting, the way you do it, is something very, very unique for people.
Yes. If you use several cups of coffee a day, if that's a regular drinking habit for you, you might actually like the South American type better because you're used to it. But not being used to it here, it was like, whoa, I don't like this. And so I began to search out the indigenous varieties, talking to the cacao spirit. She'd lead me, sometimes literally with turn-by-turn directions, to go and find chocolate with the energy I liked. I spent 6 months touring Europe. And we'd go into a little shop to get some road food, some breakfast food, and we'd buy a bar of whatever was in the little organic shop we were visiting, and eat it walking down the street. And about 10 minutes later, my sweetheart and I would look at each other and go, It just didn't have the energy.
I lived in Switzerland. They make a big deal to have hot cocoa at 11 a.m., right? Which, if you notice circadian rhythm, according to holistic Chinese medicine, for example, this is the high tide of the heart, which we know it affects. So it's very interesting kind of traditions that you start to see. But I remember being there at that time, and you know, it's loaded with sugar. It's not, and then you come here and you have this thing here. It's like, wow, this is what chocolate is supposed to be. And it's a completely different experience. You mentioned the low potency of everything that's really on the market vis-a-vis, right, indigenous high-powered, super, super quality cacao like we get a chance to have here and like you had a chance to discover. But you said something very interesting. How far out is it for people? I think partly for my audience, and I want to go back to what you said, which is that, the plant teacher guided you. I mean, for where we live, that's not that outrageous a statement. And I know what you're talking about, and I understand this. If you live in the forest long enough, you get it. I don't care how sort of closed off and mainstream you've become. You get what that whole nature teacher thing is. And the concept of plant teachers is a fabulous concept that so many people in my world, certainly the world of the people who will be watching a lot of these videos, say more about it. I mean, how do you make that connection if you hear that and you're like, yeah, right. Or you're either very dismissive, or how could that be? Or, gee, I really believe in pharmaceutical drugs. Isn't there just a massive need right now for some kind of connection back to, again, something like plant teachers? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's one of the avenues to rattle your cage, to shake up the box a little bit and open possibilities for something different. A lot of people from the 60s until now got introduced through plant spirit medicines, through psychedelics, through working with the shamans of indigenous psychedelic using cultures. I did. And those teachers or energies are really good for some people, not everyone, to shake them up a little bit, open some possibilities, see other realities.
It's great language. You talk about shaking people up, and I know also, and I see this in the marketing of Lava Love Cacao, which is the brand, right, that Isaiah put together and the Mendoza family does, which is great. It's a successful business. And we'll talk about, for those of you who want, how to get this and how to find it. But talk about the shift. And, we live in Maya culture. This 2012 thing came and went. Obviously, the people who are waiting for a meteor to fall out of the sky were disappointed, but there's a very profound shift going on, isn't there? And how is this important to your work as a guide teaching about plant teachers and all the rest? What is the shift? I mean, we are in the midst of something very profound in the human experience, and I think some people miss it because they're busy watching CNN and BBC, and they don't really get that, like, no, this is how you're going to get through this time, and not be a lunatic, right? Here's how you're really going to go back to learn something that I think a lot of people have missed.
Well, back in the 70s, someone said, the revolution will not be televised.
Right.
And in a way that is just as true today, because everyone has their own timing. And when they hit that wake-up period, when the world in them compels them into something else, all kinds of things happen. Some people, everything falls apart. You've got a business, you've got a family, you've got this, you've got that, and it all just crumbles because it's built on a foundation that isn't real. Some people do it that way. Some people have a much more gradual awakening. Some people have arranged their lives.
What is the awakening? What is the shift? It's a shift toward an internal reality that becomes more real than your external, how's my 401k kind of reality? Is that partly what it is? What is the shift? I mean, if we really pondered it, what is the shift? Mythology tells us something about this.
Yes, individual for everyone. Completely unique. Everyone on their own journey. Some people will do the shift inside the context of traditional religious practice. Mm-hmm. Other people get into New Age or shamanic energies. It's all the same. It's all
different wrapper, but a lot of the same psychological realizations, to be sure.
Yes. Yeah. And understanding that reality is a holographic projection from inside. It's not out there.
That's a very Asian idea, isn't it? Right? The idea that all is illusion?
Read Plato, The Republic.
Right.
The light coming through the entrance of the cave, the shadows on the wall are what everyone think is real.
This is very quantum physics oriented.
Yes, it's Plato, it's Eastern, it's quantum reality
Yeah.
that says basically the building blocks of the universe are consciousness.
And
form,
not physical.
And not physical. And form flows out of the consciousness.
Right.
And so that consciousness is changing. And we're in a process now of having the energy go up on the planet. It's been doing that every year since the 50s, but the increase per year is now going
It's vertical.
off the scales.
Right,
yes.
right.
And it's increasing considerably. And people talk about the 0 point and all that, when it finally peaks to the max. All these ways of trying to describe when something goes completely off the charts. My experience of the energies going up is that what you have inside you that is belief systems from the culture that aren't yours is pain or fear begins to come up to the surface. Your, to use Eckhart Tolle's term, your pain body, other people call it your density or your dark shadow, begins to objectify itself symbolically in increased trauma, drama, pain, struggle, suffering, diseases, problems that the medical profession...
Physical diseases, but also psychological, like types of madness, no?
Yeah. Mental, everything. Things that the medical profession can't find any cause for. These kinds of things increase.
Well,
you have problems.
You said something very interesting, because this is my realm. Okay?
Yes, it is.
I'm getting Chinese medicine, holistic medicine, acupuncture in particular, because it's the low-hanging fruit. As you know, I work in a hospital in Santiago and also created another one in Chicago. And this is like everything that you hear that's wrong with the medical system is not actually a problem with the medical system. It's a shift in epidemiology.
Yes.
Right? The medical system's fabulous at what it does. Problem is, a lot of people ain't suffering from that anymore. They're suffering from this kind of awakening of, gee, this is not what I had hoped, wished, been told that it was supposed to be, meaning my life. Right? So the shift, back to the shift, excuse me, you said something very profound there, because it's partly why I created patient empowerment and self-care, is like, you got to understand, right? You got to advocate for yourself at this time. So.
Well, Christian, everybody flies this in a different way. And I'm kind of an expert in how to birth those realities, how to help validate what's already there, how to help emerge what someone's already doing. Not so much to teach something new, but to help come from inside. And the chocolate came to be a partner in that.
Okay, Keith, you talked about that it's different for everyone. You know, the awakening, the shift, whatever you want to call it, and this very interesting thing that we get to be very close to and on the sidelines of, watching people come through our little pueblo, also being foreigners in this incredible indigenous environment. Like, where else can you live with real indigenous people on this level of intimacy the way we do here? But and you say it's different for everyone, and I know what you mean, but are there similarities to people's awakening? Is there like a common thread where people are kind of like, oh, that's the part I didn't get from my regular, square upbringing in North America or Europe, or the kind of parts of the world culturally that have lost contact in a way that the indigenous have not lost contact with this way of living? Is there something similar that you see happening over and over again that's like, that's kind of it? You know, the light bulb that goes on is very much like ABC.
No.
There really isn't.
I don't see one, because who you really are underneath the conditioning, underneath the fear and the pain, underneath the energy blockages, is completely unique. And what wakes up is an enhancement of healing abilities, creative abilities, or manifestation abilities, which is all pretty much the same.
Is there an element of recognition of symbology? You know, Joseph Campbell makes the point. I love this a series that I have by him. He starts off, he says, my favorite definition of mythology is other people's religion.
Yes.
And my favorite definition of religion is misunderstood mythology. And the misunderstanding consisting precisely in, right, I'm quoting here loosely, the idea that historical events, that symbolic events are actually historical facts, when in reality, right, the Red Sea and parting the sea and all of these things that are written about in ancient texts are symbolic of psychological realizations within the human psyche, and that this thing called the spirit, the human spirit, is very much about your imagination and your ability to manifest what you can imagine. I mean, this is the human thing, right? It's a very, very special capability that the human animal has. So what about the symbology of, and the symbology around cacao, and how people awake to symbolism that we're largely cut off from in the modern era?
When Western people first got to Mexico, the indigenous local name for the cacao that you would drink was heart blood.
Heart blood.
Now, indigenous languages are very poetic. And so, for me, the blood that flows through the heart is love. Linnaeus, the originator of scientific nomenclature, named this plant Theobroma, food of the gods. What would the food of the gods be besides love? So that understanding that this is a heart facilitator, a love facilitator, in the expanded love sense, is the basic energy that comes from cacao. Yeah, you can use it to write software. Yes, you can use it for creativity. It is absolutely incredible for a long night of dancing. But really, all those things are just connecting to something that you really want to do. Now, my interest is in the inner work. So I see mostly people who are interested in having healing and consciousness abilities open, who are already having psychic phenomena going on in their lives, and they want to stabilize and deepen it. Those kinds of things.
As one author put it, just to touch back on this theobromide, this idea of food of the gods, what would the food of the gods be? One author said it so wonderfully, and I actually had a period in my life where this was a very profound realization for me. The opposite of love is not hate, of course. These actually come around and form actually what is essentially one psychological posture, manifested in different behavior, no doubt, but that love and hate are not opposites, but the opposite of love, the opposite of fear is love.
Yes.
And the opposite of love, then, is what? What would be the opposite of love? Isolation, right? Disconnection. Something to this effect, right? The feeling that you're actually all alone, and this realization that, wait a second, as much as it's a New Age mantra, we are all one, right? And the world keeps shrinking through technology and all the rest, but the psychological realization that actually we are all on this ship together, no?
Yes, and that is one of the many levels that is emerging. That we are one. The planet herself is part of that. But that realization will come differently for everybody. For some people, it begins environmentally. For other people, through medicine. For other people, through quantum realities and scientific, bleeding-edge scientific understandings. So everybody's going to find it through a different route.
A different vehicle, but
yeah,
a lot of this.
For other people, they'll find it shamanically, with various systems of New Age energy healing.
And so on.
Yeah. You found it through TCM. That was your doorway.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
actually, my doorway was a woman, as it is for so many men. It was a relationship that I had that really cracked me open, and that the whole trip that I've had through medicine was really about that relationship, which is why I'm so very, very happy to sort of finish what I wanted to do in medicine and just share it on this level. This is going out to thousands and thousands of people trying to share a different level of here's hospital quality holism. We've been waiting for it for a long time. Of course it exists. You know, pattern discrimination and all the stuff that I've shared in this program. Very, very profound kind of stuff for me, as it is, I think, for most people when that awakening happens.
Well, one of the central things that happens in this process is that in a medical line, you begin to shift out of fixing and into holding space. Now, those are the in cliche
phraseology
terms,
yeah.
The phrases for it. But what happens is that you no longer see symptoms as wrong.
And death as failure.
Yeah.
Right. As so many,
and so
much of the medical system is like, if you died, right, how much money you spent in the last month. I mean, it's astronomical, and it's you staved off death for a few days.
Yes.
Rather than looking at it as, and here we go, into death, right? That whole, Jung talks about this, having something to look forward to about your death. Right?
Yes.
Very profound. Very profound.
The greatest trip there is, that's why they save it for last.
That's great.
So, when symptoms no longer become something to fix, when healing is no longer the elimination of symptoms, then the door is open that symptoms, mental, physical, emotional, psychological, or spiritual, are metaphorical communications from within, from deeper levels of your own being, from your caring subconscious mind,
yes.
with the help of your higher self or higher knowing. Well, whatever that is for you doesn't matter.
Right, whatever you call it.
And if I told you that out here in town, I have buried a treasure, and I hand you a shovel, and you look around and you go, oh my God, I could dig for months and be nowhere. But if I said that right where I buried it, there was a 10-foot-long pole with a great big red flag waving in the breeze, you'd just wander around until you saw the flag and you'd start digging. A symptom is that flag waving in the breeze that tells you exactly where to dig for the inner healing gold.
Fantastic. And here we go right back to symbolism, right? And
yes.
Understanding the symbols of your psyche. In this case, illness, symptoms, symptomology that are symbolic of dig here to find your treasure. This is basic to mythology.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the things that, again, right, to make this all apropos to our topic for this interview, this is what cacao really helps you with. Is
yes.
the understanding of, no, don't avoid it, dig, right?
Yeah.
Dig
It
in.
helps bring up those communications as a flow of thoughts, images, feelings, emotions, or little stiff places in your body.
I got one of those today.
People start to stretch out and get their inner teacher to shut up and quit bothering them.
Yes.
So, when you get past that, and you follow it deeper, it's a decoding process. It's Carl Jung pointed out, the language of the subconscious is symbols, images, and metaphors. It doesn't speak your native language. If you want to communicate with your inner reality, you have to use that language. And that is the shamanic journey. Knowing that. As a facilitator, it's not my primary interest. My primary interest would be referred to as inner processing, working with the pain body, shadow work, dark shadow work, emotional release work.
You're a PhD as well. You have PhD kind of training, am I right? Or
I don't.
You had training in my geology or something as well.
Yes, my official training was in geology.
Geology. A geologist turned sort of spiritual practitioner and chocolate shaman therapist as well. I mean, I speak very highly of what you do in a town where there's a lot of people doing quote therapy work. And I think you see the gamut from super new age, like I did my Reiki certification in one weekend and I'm going to fix everything in the world, all the way to people who have really, and this is what I respect about what you do, there are several people in the town who have really done the legwork to know their topic, right? And I like very much that I can share this with people because you're one of the people who you really did travel, you really did go pursue this, you really did have dreams and follow what the dream told you to do. And this is a different kind of training, isn't it?
It's training that comes from inside. It's not training where you study something. Although I ended up pouring through the web, the medical literature, the scientific literature, the raw foods literature, the bean to bar literature, all of that kind of stuff, as well as the commercial chocolate, the commodities market, and all of that, everything. Because I basically understood I was going to end up as some kind of an authority on chocolate, and I was going to have to know what I was talking about.
Right.
So,
right. Which is very, very commendable.
I found in an anthropological journal years ago, after asking the cacao spirit, okay, so I'm understanding chocolate, I'm getting into this, I'm teaching others, what's this about? And I found an ancient Central and South American myth in an anthropological journal that said, when mankind gets out of harmony with the natural world, chocolate, cacao, comes out of the rainforest to open people's hearts and reestablish the balance. And I went, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm participating in the process of assisting cacao to come out of the rainforest as a heart-opening, connecting tool. And some of the first things I learned about this kind of chocolate that has the goodies in it, was that it's the best creativity facilitator I know.
That's true. I'm here to tell you, it's a guy who's had a lot of cacao, the same kind that you serve, the same brand, right, that you guys put together and serve in your very special ceremonies. There's nothing like it. I'm tempted to ask you in his best languages we can, because it's like acupuncture. If you haven't had great acupuncture, you just don't know what that feels like. And I tell patients this all the time. There is no way for me to describe it. You've got to feel what it actually does to your nervous system and all the rest. Talk about, as best as you can, right, what the experience would be like for a person who's never had this. You said it's not psychedelic. It's not. You're not going to. The wallpaper isn't going to crawl off and start talking to you. It's nothing like that. But what is the experience? Talk about exactly what that experience is. Yeah, as best as you can.
It doesn't take you on a trip. It doesn't do anything. But if you want to go somewhere, connect to something, it's a facilitator for that.
Hyperclarity is one thing that I feel. You talk about heart opening, which can sound real new age, but by God, you really are filled. It does increase blood flow. Talk about some of the physical effects so that the hardcore Western types really have something to cling to for what this does to you.
The principal physical effect is a 30 to 40% increase in blood flow to the brain.
Mostly to the brain, right? But
heart
increasing
rate goes
circulation.
Up.
Yeah.
But it's a potent vasodilator, so your blood vessels relax and open. So blood pressure actually goes down. The chocolate is, basically this kind of chocolate is the best treatment for high blood pressure out there. Takes about 20 grams per day, taken in like 3 doses.
What would that be in terms of beans or cups? That's 20 grams would be...
It depends a lot on the chocolate.
Yeah.
Of my chocolate, it would be about 20 grams.
Okay.
I've had artists come in here and tell me that this stuff, when they consume chocolate, plugs them directly in to their source of creativity. I've had writers tell me...
I've done some of my best work on it, I can tell you that, so yes.
I've had writers tell me that it takes them to another level of clarity. We sell it to people who are coders, who write software.
Of course.
And they tell me that with a little of the cacao in their system, they can hold the various parts of the software in their brain and know what the code they're writing is going to do to each of those segments of the programming.
Hyper-creativity. In Stephen Kotler, who wrote a wonderful book called The Rise of Superman, this is a flow hack.
Yeah.
Puts you into a psychological state of flow in a couple of cups, and I mean, you got endless stamina. Like
it's a productive focus enhancer.
Productive focus enhancer. That's
for whatever you want to do. Yeah. Whether that is go for a hike,
dance,
write, everything.
Yeah.
I haven't found anything that it doesn't work well with.
It is also a great aphrodisiac, ladies and gentlemen, as advertised. So no question, right? This connection that people have with cacao and love, heart opening, heart feeling kind of sentiment and all the rest, that's real, isn't it?
Yeah, you get almost double the oxygenation to your skin. You're able to hold a focus. You're able to connect. And if you're choosing to connect with your partner, you do.
So much the better. Downsides to it? Are there drawbacks? Is there such a thing as ODing on cacao? I know you talk about it. You absolutely can, right?
Oh, yeah. Cacao is bitter. If you take too much of any bitter from the plant or chemical world, you'll first get nauseous, and then you'll throw up, and then you'll throw up for hours and hours and hours, depending on how much you take.
That's an acute overdose. But what about taking, say, 2 cups of cacao a day for 6 months? Like, what's going to happen to you with high levels over a long period?
Fun.
Good fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've now been consuming it almost every day for over 10 years.
Wow.
And the longer I take it, I have the same experience most people do. The longer I consume it, the less I use.
Yeah.
I'm taking...
Take almost homeopathic doses at a certain point.
Yeah, I'm taking about a third right now of what I started with on a daily basis, and that's enough.
Me too. I have a couple beans in my cereal. I may have a cup several times a week, but not very often. Usually I'm eating the raw beans, the seeds.
I know a number of therapists who will keep some of the beans in their pocket, the unground, and when they start to lose their edge after a few clients, they'll just munch on a few of those beans.
There's no trail mix like this.
Yeah, go right back into the focus. And speaking of trail mix, this kind of cacao does appear in some trail mixes. And there's one answered question that I don't know. Because it's a vasodilator, cacao's in the tropics. You don't freeze to death down here. But used in high altitude conditions where hypothermia might be a problem, the vasodilation of cacao could conceivably get you in trouble if you were in a major hypothermic, heat loss situation. It could accelerate your death.
Sure. Well,
I actually don't know whether or not the body could capillary restrict and shut that down.
Yeah. Keith, advice for first-timers, people who wanted to use this. We're going to, on the page here, you'll see the link on how to get this wonderful quality cacao. But what about advice for people doing this? You have a wonderful setup and ceremony to facilitate this for people. Quite frankly, if you're watching this, you really should be thinking about getting on a plane and coming to Guatemala to experience this. I'm not kidding. It's that profound. And for all the other reasons that there's just wonderful stuff to do here in our little pueblo. But, if you bought this and got it shipped to you, any advice for people to really have the experience that we're describing and not profane it the way you would have, 6 cups of coffee with sugar and cream? Like, how would you do it? What would you tell people?
Well, first is to understand that when I first started talking to people about chocolate as a spiritual, creative facilitator, everyone thought it was a joke. And many still do. So read the website.
Yeah. You have great material.
You cannot use this kind of chocolate if you're on a significant dose of an antidepressant. You'll have a major reaction in your serotonin and dopamine receptors because you can't mix cacao with monoamine oxidase inhibitors.
It's dangerous.
Or you can't mix antidepressants with monoamine oxidase inhibitors.
Right.
You'll get a major migraine.
Yeah.
A few people with a major heart condition will, if you got to really be careful going upstairs or something that, will want to go easy with it.
Okay.
Because it does increase your heart rate 15 to 20%. That's insignificant to most people, but for some people that could be important.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very important disclosure there. Listen, we have the contact information for how you're going to get this. It's absolutely the best quality cacao I've ever seen, and I travel all over the world. You can't really find this. Keith, thank you very much for your time. This has been a fantastic learning experience for people. I want to share more with folks, but let's wrap this up here. And again, thank you so much. I look forward to turning people on to your stuff, because I think you've just done such a great job of bringing this and making this available.
Well, thank you, Christian.
Thank you so much.
Nice having you here in town.
Thanks very much.